10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
And we are live. Good evening, Lizzie. How are you?
I am so good. It's morning here, not evening.
It's evening in South Africa. I can't believe we are on, different sides of the continent of the globe, and we are here together in this StreamYard room. How amazing is that?
I know, it's so amazing. This whole virtual thing is just amazing because we can meet from people all over the world. It's so awesome.
It is so awesome, and we are so blessed to have you with us here at the Meticulous Moments podcast, where we facilitate community upliftment through leadership development. We would love to welcome you to our show today, Lizzie Ens. You are such an inspiration to us all. I just want to run the audience through your bio. Lizzie, a former Amish girl, chose to jump for a better life and future. Now board certified nutrition practitioner, she's a personal trainer and author, a speaker on a mission to make an impact. My goodness, you have been through so much, Lizzie. Please introduce yourself to the audience before we jump into this exciting conversation.
Yes, absolutely. First of all, thank you for having me. It's such an honor. And like you said from the bio, I grew up in an Amish community until the age of 19 when I then decided to run away and basically escape and create a brand new life. And now it's been 19 years since I left, and I'm just starting to really dive into that story, which is why I wrote a book and the entire thing there. And it's leading me into so many things since I wrote the book, which is amazing. And my mission is to not only help people in their health, because that's my profession, and what I do is help people get healthy, heal their bodies from root cause issues, but it's also leading to so much more than that. Helping women come out of a form of suppression and finding their voice and walking into that truth that they are meant to walk in and where God is leading them. So it's leading to a lot of things.
I love that. I love that everything you do has to do with empowering people. And I really, when we were on the Alma show together, when I met you at the business boot camp and you presented, you were speaking there. I believe you were part of the speaker competition. It was just so lovely to hear you telling your story with so much passion and so much compassion, for the people that you grew up with, and the people that your parents that raised you, and your siblings, and the people that you are touching, whose lives you are touching now. So I just want to say welcome here. We are blessed to have you, and I would like to ask you to tell us a little bit about your life, being a part of the Amish community. What was life like? What stood out? What would you say is the difference between being in an Amish community and, just leaving that community and starting a new life?
Yeah, so let's dive into the part of what it's like to live there. And before I go into all of that, I always want to make it very clear that I'm very grateful for what I learned and what it taught me. And that's where that compassion comes in. So when you hear me talk about this, I'm not talking out of this hatred towards the community, because I believe that everything happens for a reason, and it was by design. It was not a mistake that I was there. And so when you can understand that things are by design and not by mistake, do we make mistakes in life? Of course, but me being born into that community was not a mistake. It was a divine thing that happened, that God put me there for a reason, to learn the things that I did. And that's where that compassion comes in. And when you can understand that part, it changes your entire life. So living in that community, it's no electricity, no indoor plumbing. It's lots of hard work. I always tell people, like, it's kind of like living in the 1600s, where you're riding in a horse and buggy, and you're using horses for your farming and your gardening, and you're milking cows by hand. And it's a lot of really hard work, but I'm grateful for that, because it taught me how to work hard, and it taught me how to have the downside of growing up there, and the way that the church treated people and their belief system, and the suppression of your voice, and specifically the voices of women, and the rules and the regulations of the church, and the things that they require you to do or make you do with their rules that you have, and who they teach you God is, and that he's, up in the sky ready to beat you over the head if you do something wrong. Like, the religious part of things is where it's not a very good experience.
Yeah.
So for me, living in that, having what I had inside of me, and always questioning things, and asking the questions of why are we doing the things the way that we are, and that caused a lot of stir up in the community. Like, my mom didn't know how to talk to me, because I always had questions, and I always wondered, why are we doing things the way that we are? I asked her one time, I said, okay, so Amish people are the only people that will go to heaven, but there's all these other people that live on earth and that live here. Like, why would God create all these other people if only Amish people go to heaven? And her answer was, that's just the way it is. I also asked her, okay, there's this lady that was always coming to our house because we sold, lots of things from the house, from the farm. And she would always talk about God. And they believe, like, you shouldn't cut your hair. Well, this lady had really short hair, but she loved God. And I asked my mom, I said, okay, so she loves God, but because she cut her hair, that means she can't go to heaven. And once again, my mom goes, that's just the way it is. And I was in a place where I said, I won't accept that. I was in a place where I said, I won't accept that is who God really is. So that was a stir in my heart. And, in my teenage years is when I started to really seek, what is it like outside of here? And what are people doing? And how could my life be different? And it was one of those things where, where sometimes you're like, you feel like you're taught or told that you need to live or believe a certain way, but every ounce of you, everything inside of you goes, I can't see it. I can't see it, and I can't believe it. And just because others have told me this and taught me this, I can't get on board with it. That's where I was. It's like, visionary wise, I couldn't see myself there. And I think that
it's interesting. Please continue.
I think that that's something that we need to learn how to pay attention to in our own personal life on a daily basis. Is just because other people have said this is what you need to do, or this is what you should do, yet every ounce of you in your soul and your spirit and your body cannot get on board with it, and cannot see and visualize that in the future or in the now, yet we choose to ignore it because of what others have told us. And I believe that it is really, really, really important that we start paying attention to what is our truth and what is the truth that God is telling us, because nobody knows what your relationship is with God in what he's telling you more than you do.
Mm-hmm.
If you have that close relationship with him and you know how to hear him.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. And we had a brief discussion the other day about the difference between being in a religious space, living according to religion, and having a relationship with God. And I believe that when you start to have a relationship with God, you stop living from or thinking and living from your mind per se. You live with your heart. Because I've always thought over the years, the Bible says, and we love the word of God. Of course, the Bible says, as a
Yeah.
man thinks in his heart, so is he. So I don't like to live here. I don't want to be caught up in my mind and in the doctrine. And it's something that I studied up to master's level. And I was in a denomination, a religious denomination for 15 years. I was an ordained pastor. But I really tried to get all those years out of my mind and into my heart. Because when I live according to my heart, I'm being true to myself. And I feel like that is something that you are describing in the terms that you use. So thank you so much for that. You were until what age were you in the Amish community? What age did you decide to finally, follow your heart and do what makes you happy?
Absolutely. 19. I ran away when I was 19. Now I have a twin sister, and
Oh,
when we were 17, the two of us ran away for 2 days, and then she said, "I need to go back. I can't do this to my family because if you leave like that, it's like someone died. They're mourning you as if someone
oh
died."
my goodness.
And she
Yeah.
said, "I can't do this to my family." So she said, "I'm going back." And I said, "Okay, well, if you're going back, then I have to go back as well." But I told her the following day, "I can't stay
Yeah.
here. Like, I don't belong here," because I knew me going back, there was no way that I was going to stay there. And my heart and soul didn't belong there. But it took me 2 years to then finally make that decision and leave at the age of 19. Yeah.
Wow. But you had your plan and you decided you were going to do that because that was something that you really wanted to do and your heart was speaking to you. A lot of things that we go through and a lot of preconceptions people want to put into our minds really speak to the way we think. But if we really start living from this space and not from here, Michael LeBlanc always says we live from here to here and not the other way around. And I agree with him. I just I know because I have similar circumstances. So there's a few synchronicities between you and I. And I grew up in a very religious church. I went out into the world. I came back. I went into another denomination, and I was also enlightened, I'd say, during the last few years since COVID. So it feels like there was an awakening. It feels like for the first
Yeah.
time in all those years, I understand God so much better, like you've mentioned, and I hear God, better and better every day. So, but still, I have days where I sit and I work and I stop and I reminisce about times that I had in the church or functions that I did or people that I knew, and I think about my memories. Are there times where you sit, Lizzie, and think, that day I baked bread with mom, or that day we planted this and it was such a beautiful day in the sky?
Mhm.
Are there times that you have those flashbacks? And do you still, I know you mentioned that you still have contact with your family?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first of all, I do go see my mom every now and then. We don't live in the same state anymore, but I usually go see her like once a year. My dad is not alive anymore. He died when I was still at home. But I would say in the first 10 years, I
Oh,
had a lot more of those moments where I would think that. However, there are very specific, significant things that will stand out if I live in the city. If I go somewhere where I get to be in nature and I go into the woods and I walk around, like it takes me back because of the smell of nature and the thing, because that's what I was used to. And it brings back very specific memories. Went to a German restaurant one time in Mexico, and they brought out this bowl of homemade bread and jams and jellies, and we used to make bread every single week, like fresh bread every single week. And I hadn't had like any of that in years. And I took that bread and I took one bite of it, and it instantly transported me back into our pantry at home. And I was like, I'm at home right now. And so there's very, very specific, like significant moments that has happened. Over my dad's death anniversary, like it always happens, like those things come back, or like the smell of fall because it was in the fall, and things like that. Yes, it will happen, but it's very, very significant when it does. Yeah.
It's beautiful, and it's part of your journey, because you mentioned that you learned good and solid things, life principles when you were in the Amish community, and that's nothing to throw away. Those are things to build upon. And you mentioned that working so hard taught you now in your business and in your coaching space also to be a hard worker. So that is it's heartwarming to hear that. Because your mom is a good mom. I know you mentioned you have many siblings. It takes a very strong woman to raise children. I have 2 children, and let me tell you, it's hard work. And I know you're also a mother. It's hard work to raise a child. So it's beautiful to hear that. I want to ask you about that night. If you'll tell us about your book, about that night when you jumped off that roof, I would love to know what you felt when you look back and you were like, I did it, and there's no going back.
Yeah, it's one of those moments that's so surreal, and I talk about this in my book, and walk you through the entire thing in my thought process. But just to go into it a little bit, I jumped off a 15-foot roof to run away, and I had only decided at noon that day that I was leaving. Now, I know that God was urging me leading up to that. I know that now. I didn't know it at the time, but I know that now. I know he was urging me. I know he was pushing me, and he's like, get out, like you need to leave. And so a few months leading up to that, I knew something was about to change. I just didn't know what. I was dating this guy from New York at the time, and we would only see each other a couple times a year. Otherwise, we would write letters to each other, and we had never talked about leaving. That specific day, I went to deliver a letter to the mailbox. It was my turn. And when I got there, there was a note there from him saying that he ran away with his sister and her boyfriend. They drove down from New York to Ohio, where I was living, and they ran away. And he left a note and said, I left. If you want to leave, you can come. We'll come by tonight at 10 p.m. and pick you up. If you don't want to leave, I'll come by later and talk to you. And I literally like snapped my fingers and I said, I'm leaving.
Yeah.
I didn't have to think about it because I was so ready that this was my way out. Now, mind you, my twin sister was getting married 6 months later, and I knew that she was going to be getting married. And if I also knew that if I left at that point in time, I would not be at her wedding. So I had a decision to make. Do I stay 6 more months and then leave? Or do I leave knowing that I'm not going to be at her wedding? And I knew in my heart that if I were to stay 6 more months, I probably would never leave. This was my only way out. Yeah. So I didn't tell I didn't tell anybody that I was leaving or that I was going to leave. I had to decide how I was going to leave. So I waited until I was working at my oldest sister's house as a hired maid at her place. So I wasn't even at home where I grew up. And so I waited until bedtime that night, and I went upstairs to pretend like I was going to bed. And I wrote a little note for my family, and I said, listen, this has nothing to do with you. This is everything to do with me, and I have to go. That's it. And I still, to this day, I'm like really astonished that I said those words, because I'm like, I don't even know where I learned to say that, because you're so sheltered. And I'm just like, oh, I don't want them to think that it has anything to do with them. It doesn't. It has everything to do with me and making this
Yeah.
decision.
And good people.
Yeah, on my own. So
Yeah.
I wrote a note, and I went over to the window, and I opened the window, and I climbed up out onto the roof to jump off this 15-foot roof. And I'm literally sitting there for 30 minutes, like trying to figure out how I'm going to jump off this roof and not break a bone. And I, you know, I thought to myself, yeah, if I jump and I break a bone, I'll end up in the hospital and I'll never be able to leave. Like, I just know that.
Ooh.
And then the entire community will find out. Like, she was
Yes.
trying to run away, and that's what she gets. So,
Yeah. I can understand why you feel that way. Yeah.
like all the thoughts going through your head. Mind you, I had $20 in my pocket, the clothes I was wearing, and a flashlight and a couple other little things, and that was it. And I had no idea what life held on the other side. I had, no job, nothing lined up. I was clueless on what it held. I just knew that I needed to leave, and it was my time to go. So finally, I get enough courage to jump, and I jump, and I could have ran straight to the road that was like 20 feet away, but I was so scared that someone heard me jump off the roof that I quickly went to the side of the building, and I ran back to the back of the property around like 4 buildings and then up and over, because I didn't want anybody to see me and know that I was leaving.
Yes.
And
did your boyfriend pick you up?
Yeah, so they were up on the hill waiting on me to pick me up. Yeah.
Wow. What a joyous moment. That was the moment of freedom. And
Yes.
Lizzie, I was sitting and thinking as you were speaking, that's how it goes with risks. It's all or nothing. We should really, and that's what I love about your story, because it really brings that message. When you take a risk and you really stand for the things that you believe in, you better have the courage that Lizzie had to know it's now or never. It's all or nothing. Because I'll tell the audience something today. She followed her heart. And there's something that I've learned over all the years. The heart wants what the heart wants. You would have regretted it every single day for the rest of your life if you didn't take that jump. For someone in the audience today, if there's something that you know that your heart is pulling towards, take that jump. Have that courage. More often than not, it's going to work out for you like it did for Lizzie.
And you're so right, because we can get so paralyzed in the thought of all the things we're going to lose if we jump, if we take the risk. So we get so hung up on, I will lose, my entire family. I will lose my church. I will lose my community. I will lose all of these things. But the reality is, like you said, the heart wants what the heart wants. And if God is leading you forward and saying, I need you to walk through this door, because where I'm leading you, you need to get rid of the things that are holding you back.
Yeah.
You need to say bye, and you need to be okay saying bye and not looking at it as I'm losing everything, and looking at what you're gaining, looking at what you're walking into, and what is God really going to do in your life when you truly walk in what your heart is telling you and what He's telling you. If you know that that's where He's leading you, it doesn't matter what you need to leave behind. It doesn't. Because guess what? He has it all laid out and figured out already. And you're going to feel like you're losing. It's going to be painful. Trust me. It will be painful because you're going to have to cut ties with things and people. You will. Trust me. I've walked through that many times, where you have to learn how to cut ties, and you have to be okay with it. But you also have to understand that on the other side of that door that you're trying to break down right now, there's abundance.
Amen, sister. Amen to that. I'll tell you what happened with me, and that's why you and I, when we had our virtual coffee the other day, it was so wonderful to hear, how the things that we go through or went through are so similar. I was 15 years a pastor. I was ordained, and I was in a very unhappy marriage because my ex-husband had a lot of things that he was working through. And after, or when COVID hit, he decided he became disenchanted with the ministry. And he decided he wants to do something else with his life. And of course, we had been together for so long. I wished him the best. And I said, of course, but I still want to be, at that time, I still wanted to be a pastor full time. So we went to the church, and we explained the situation to them in the denomination that we were in. And the church quite bluntly told us, well, he can go do what he wants to do, but if I get divorced, if I don't stay in that unhappy marriage, I can't be a pastor anymore. So I sat there, and I thought to myself, well, now they're just making it easy, because I'm not going to live the rest of my life in unhappiness, in a unstable home, in a place where none of us are growing, no one is really going anywhere, nothing's happening. And I took that jump, Lizzie. I mean, I had been doing that for so long. And I just decided, you know what? I'm just going to go do it, and that's it. And I jumped, and I never ever looked back. I said, I'm never going to look back. I'm never going to say, oh, but now I'm going to make it work. And I see that in you. You jumped, you went, you made a success of your life. You keep on building, you keep on scaling your business. And now you are spreading that light and that courage and, that knowledge out there. So what happened when you left with your boyfriend? I know you can't give us all the details of your book, but let me rather ask it this way. What was the passion in your heart, that dream that you wanted? Remember I said the heart wants what the heart wants. What was it that you wanted to go do out in the world?
I didn't know, because we were never asked what we want to be when we grow up. We had an 8th grade education. We didn't have people speaking into our life and saying, what do you want to do? Because the expectation was that you are going to get married and have lots of babies. That was the expectation. So what do you need more than an 8th grade education for that? Right? So leaving opened up a door in a way to things and exposure to, wow, like all these things are possible. And I remember in the first year, someone mentioned to me, like, oh, you could go study for your GED. And if you wanted to get a GED, then you could get a higher education if you wanted to. And that was the first time that I had ever heard of that.
Wow.
So I never even thought about what I wanted to do or be or what career I wanted until I was studying for my high school diploma. And my teacher goes, hey, Lizzie, what is it that you want to do? What are you passionate about? Do you want to go to college? Do you want to study something very specific? And I couldn't answer her because nobody had ever asked me that question before. But it didn't take me long to find it, because it was within that time frame of me being in school. And I really think she planted a seed, and it made me go, what do I want to do? What's possible? To me, going to college was like nearly impossible. I was supporting myself. Like, how am I going to work and support myself going to college? I didn't have any family there or anybody to be like, all right, well, I'll support you, or you can come live with us and you go to college. Like, there was nothing like that. It was me or no one. So I remember when I was studying for my GED that I one day I was working at a nursing home at this specific time as an aide, and I was in this patient's room, and I had my back turned towards the TV at the time, and the TV was on, but this commercial comes on, and they start talking about health and nutrition. And mind you, I had not been into any kind of health stuff at the time. But when that commercial came on, I literally turned around and I pointed at the TV and I said, that's what I'm going to do one day. I had no idea how. I just knew that something within that commercial that came on spoke to me, and it was the beginning of the journey. So I started to get into exercise. I started to like look into what does eating healthy even mean, and it took me down many journeys, but that's ultimately was the beginning of what led me to what I'm doing now.
It was that moment. I
Mhm.
call those penny drop moments when I stop and I have that realization about something.
Yeah.
It's wonderful to hear how God directed your path. You mentioned that. You mentioned that God, put that dream in your heart to do something bigger and better with your life. And I really see Him leading you down the right path.
Mhm.
And I want to ask you, how long did you go away from home before you actually made contact with your parents, with your mom again, and with your family? And what did they say? How did they react?
Yeah, a really rough journey. It took, I think I was gone for about 2 months or so before I went back. I can't remember the exact timeline. My mom and my twin sister actually came to see me so 2 days after I left, I got a job at a local restaurant as a dishwasher. And they found out that that's where I was working. I don't know how, I just know they found out. And they drove down there in horse and buggy to meet me at the restaurant and to have a conversation with me. So I sat down and I had a conversation with them, and of course they're completely heartbroken, and they, are trying to convince me to come back home, but when I left, I didn't look back. I didn't say I'm going to be gone for 6 months or a year and then come back, which a lot of kids do that. Like they'll leave and they say, "Oh, I'll be gone for like 6 months or a year," because the idea of never being or with your family again, or seeing all the people that you saw at church every Sunday, like those kind of things, like it's really hard to fathom. But for me, it was different. It was only forward. It was never back. Now, did I miss my family and was that difficult and hard? Absolutely, it was. But I also knew that I was never going to go back. So I had to learn how to be okay with saying that's what it's going to be. And I've coached other people on this that have left, and they have had such a hard time accepting the fact that their family doesn't accept them for the decisions that they made, and that they just want their family to accept them for who they are and the decision that they made. And I said, listen, you can't hold that against them for how they feel about the decision that you made, because you're the one that decided to leave. They didn't. And you have to understand that you now know two sides of the story here. You know what it's like to live there, and you know what it's like to be outside of it and experience life in a different way. You have different perspectives. So you have to
Yes.
understand
Yeah.
that you can't blame them for their feelings of hurt and pain and wanting you to come back, because they have one point of view. You have two. So
Yes. Yes.
allowing them the space to have the feelings that
Mm.
they do and the thoughts that they do, and understanding like the things that the church teaches them, and saying like, oh, they're going to hell because they left, like those kinds of
Oh,
things.
yeah.
Allowing them to have those feelings and those thoughts,
Mm.
that's not my job to try to convince them any other way. And it took
I agree.
my mom about 2 years to finally like not try to convince me to come back and accept me for the decision that I made. And I had to tell her, like, she felt like she did something wrong. And I always told her,
Oh,
like, listen, this has nothing to do with you. And it has everything to do with me as an adult making a decision. And this is
mm.
what I needed to do. It has nothing to
Yeah.
do with you. You raised me really well and you taught me a lot of
Yes.
good things.
Great mother. Yeah. Yeah.
Now
Wow.
she loves the death out of us. Like she will do
Oh,
anything
it's
to
beautiful.
make sure that no one gets in between. Like I have 3 other siblings that left, and she will make sure that nothing happens that would make us feel like we would never want to come home and see her. And she's like,
Wow.
the church has told her, like, you can't let your kids come home the way that they come home, which they don't even know how often we come home. But the communication that she has with us, the church is set, like, you shouldn't be doing that. And she's like, nobody gets to tell me that I can't see my kids, because I love my kids and I want to see them.
Well, you don't mess with Mama. She's a strong woman, you know, raising. I said that earlier for those who popped in now. She's a strong woman. She raised a lot of children. Don't mess with her.
And I think that in many ways, she's very, she wants what we have, because she sees the freedom that we have, and she would like to have that. She doesn't know how to get it. But in time, I think she will.
You never know, Lizzie. You never know. You might just get that call. You might just get that call.
I'll just have her move in with me and I'll take care of her.
I know. I can see that happening. It's going to be so, it would be so awesome. And, you know, I wanted to ask you, and it doesn't have to be, you know, if male or a female, there's no right or wrong answer, but thinking about leadership, because, you know, the Amish and denominations that I were in, they had a certain, I'd call it a patriarchal leadership structure or hierarchy. It's more male driven. It took me very long to become an ordained pastor as a female. And on top of that, I'm loud and I'm blonde. So I can just imagine the culture shock that the church had when I was finally ordained. So I'm going to ask you, a leader. Who was one of the greatest leaders in your life that you can look back, and it can be from any timeline in your life, any area, whether it's in the Amish or where you are out here in the world as us now? Who would you say was your greatest leader?
Wow. God.
Oh, amen, sister. He's our go-to.
And more, just more and more. And it's you know, when we talk about the difference between spirituality and religion, you know, there was so much deconstructing that had to happen in my belief system and who he was and how he speaks to me. And, you know, we talked about this the other days, like, I know my awakening started last year, and that is a whole different realm of how God speaks to you in the spiritual realm. And there are going to be people that won't get it, and that's okay. It's not for them to get it, but also know that if you are walking in that, there will be people that will walk away and will leave you. And I have a mentor that told me this. He said, if you walk in the truth, in your truth, and the truth that God is giving you, what doesn't belong will leave. And that's the truth. Wow. Because whether it's people or things or whatever it is, it will remove itself because it doesn't belong and it doesn't want to be there.
Yeah.
And so you can have peace about that. So if you're going through a really hard time, but you know that you are walking in the truth, your truth, and the truth that God is telling you, which should be God's truth, not what people are telling you, what is true and what is not true, and what your heart is telling you, what you should or shouldn't be doing. Wow. You know, and I read something last week that really, really made me think. And I was talking to someone else about this, and they were talking about doing what makes you happy. Now, of course, there are things that you shouldn't do that are not godly, that could make you happy short term. But the message of this was, you should always be doing what is honoring God. Also true.
Yes.
The overall message of it sounded as if you cannot be happy if you are honoring God. So my question was, so what is honoring God? Staying in a place that you've always been taught that this is the way that it needs to be and what it should be, and you're miserable, whether it's in a marriage that you talked about. Okay, so if we're taught we need to stay there because that is honoring God, even though you wouldn't be doing what you're doing right now and changing people's lives the way that you are if you stayed there.
Amen, sister.
So are you honoring God because you're staying there and you're absolutely miserable, and you're staying there because God is saying you can't be happy?
Yeah. Wow.
Because that's what people told you
Yep.
that you needed to do? Or are you going to honor God and walk in what he's telling you in your heart?
Yeah.
That you need to move forward with, so that you can actually excel and you're allowed to be happy. Because let me tell you something. I have seen a lot of people that are in religious churches that believe they cannot be happy and God only wants them to suffer. And I'm like, no.
Sad. That's very sad that they believe that, Lizzie. You are so right. Yeah.
And what is it with putting on a facade of everything is okay when it's not behind closed doors?
Yeah.
That's not honoring God either.
No, that was my point, because I said, I'm not going to preach on Sundays and, everything's beautiful, let's love the Lord, and then go home and be miserable and there's fights and everything's wrong. I would feel like, and that's you speaking right into my spirit here. And you wouldn't be happy if you had stayed, in that community, because you wouldn't be who you are today. You wouldn't have developed the way you did. You wouldn't have built up this wonderful life. I believe you have a child as well. You wouldn't have had
4.
your beautiful boy and your business. Tell us about your family that you have at the moment. Tell us about your husband and your son. Do you want more children?
Oh, that's a heavy question.
Mr. Ens, where are you?
Where are you? No, I have a 4-year-old. And he's amazing. It's crazy because I always didn't know if I even wanted to be a mom, and then he was a surprise, and it was the best thing that ever happened to me. So yeah, he's so amazing, and I love being a mom to him. So everything that I do now is to also help him and show him, what a work ethic is, and how you are in control, and you get to decide what kind of life you create. It has nothing to do with what you get handed and what people do for you, because if I can take $20 that were in my pocket and move forward. Now, it is about aligning yourself with the right people and having the right mentors in your life, 100%. But at the end of the day, it is about how much you put in and what you're willing to put in to make your life better, and walking in that truth and passion and the things that you need to do. So that's a huge piece of it. And then obviously, like, that leads into what I do in my business as well. So my coaching business is
tell us about that.
Yes. Absolutely. I'm a board certified functional nutrition practitioner. So I really work on the health and body overall. My big thing is helping people get more energy, better sleep, and heal their body from root cause issues. So for an example, like I specialize in hormones and thyroid and the gut, and those things are all connected. So most people that come to me are at this place of feeling trapped in their health because the doctors aren't helping them anymore, and our medical system is not in a great place. The way that I explain that to people is, if you go to the doctor and you get labs done, usually they're looking for a diagnosis. They're not looking for what is actually going on underneath. So they're not going to be helping you unless there's a diagnosis.
Yes.
And that brings in a lot of frustration for people, because
Yeah.
if you're only looking for diagnosis, you're waiting around until your body gets worse enough to then
Yes.
do something about it with a pill. When the reality is you can
Fix
take
it.
control and take charge of
Yeah.
your health before you have a diagnosis and before it gets that bad where you have to go on a pill.
Yeah.
So for me, I do labs for people and I'm able to read labs, but the way that we look at labs in the functional field is we're looking for clues and pieces of the puzzle to connect the dots of what is deficient, where's the information, and how do we bring deficiencies to sufficiencies, and how do we do that through the food that we eat, the exercise, the water, the sleep, like the foundations of all that. And so we're looking for the root of the issues instead of the diagnosis, and then healing the body from the inside out from there. And another example would be like, if you have a thyroid issue, it's never just a thyroid issue. You're going that the thyroid issue happened because there's other imbalances going on in the body. And so where are those imbalances and what's causing the thyroid to not be functioning optimally? All right, so now we're going to look at what's your cholesterol doing, what's your liver doing, what are your organs doing, and what's your gut telling us? And we start the healing process from there.
Wonderful. That is the right way to approach it. And I realize, I understand what you say and I agree. Rather take this approach and not wait until it's too late and the problem has actually snowballed. And then there's so many more complications, because what you mentioned is it starts somewhere else. Although the signs might be the thyroid, it started somewhere else. So that's a wonderful way to approach it. And you mentioned the gut. I read an article once that said most of the conditions, the medical conditions that people actually develop, originate from the gut. And
Over
that was
70%.
interesting. Yeah, I mean, that was astounding. I can't remember the percentage, but that's something so significant that if everybody can just look after their guts in a healthy manner, they could avoid all that illness altogether. What would your advice be to someone out there that's maybe struggling with low energy? The article mentioned brain fog, it mentioned low energy. My daughter was doing a task at school and she had to go and do that in her biology. And it was so interesting to read all the effects that an unhealthy gut can have on an individual. They might think they didn't sleep enough or they drank the wrong headache pill, but it all came down to that gut. What would you suggest for someone out there that might need to look at that?
Absolutely. So the gut is like your second brain. So if you have brain fog, there's probably something going on in your gut.
Yeah.
Because it's all connected. Your 95% of your serotonin is created in the gut.
Serotonin is that hormone. Yeah, the feel-good hormone.
The feel-good hormone. And so if your gut is imbalanced and you have inflammation in there, well, what do you think is happening to your serotonin? Okay. Dopamine is part of that.
Also hormone. Yeah.
So many hormones. So it's all connected. The reality is that there's no one-step approach to your gut, because if you could have high candida levels, which is your yeast in your body. You could have H. pylori, which is a different one. You could have SIBO. You could have IBS. They all have to do with the gut. But with each one, there has to be a little different approach in how you help it heal, because if your gut lining is impaired, well, then we need to figure out what to bring in to help that gut lining repair. Yeah. I actually have an 8-week heal your gut course that people can go through. And it really teaches people like the anatomy of your gut and very specific things that you can do on your own at home with food and home practices that you can apply that are really simple, But if you start there and you start applying those things, you're going to see a difference. It could be even enzyme deficiencies or low stomach acid. Like all of those things will impair your digestion and your gut. So one thing that I will say for many people is eat fermented foods. Because fermented,
yes, that makes sense.
Yeah. So fermented foods are high in probiotics, and we need to keep the good probiotics in our gut high. We need to keep feeding them. And so I usually tell people is like, at least bring in some fermented foods, whether that is, now if you have a histamine problem, then you may not do so well on a lot of fermented foods. But one of the things that I always tell people is start eating, like if you can handle sauerkraut, start eating like a tablespoon of sauerkraut about 5 minutes before you eat your meal.
Oh, so that it can saturate that digestive system. Oh, I see.
It prepares the digestive system, and it's also an enzyme, and you need adequate amounts of enzymes to help you digest the food better. But what the sauerkraut, the fermented food there does is it's preparing the system for better digestion.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Wonderful advice. Now tell us, I see your website name at the bottom, lizzieens.com. Can the audience reach you at lizzieens.com? Can they book a session with you, follow you there?
So that specific website is for my book. Okay. Now, if you want to connect with me, go to LizzieEns_wellness, and that's my Instagram. And I have my link there where people can follow me and they can book a session with me if they want to. Yeah.
Fantastic. Our time has flown by, but that usually happens when you and I get to talking. It's some wonderful, good conversation. I have two last questions to ask you. And the one would be, what are you grateful for today? And my final question would be, do you have any words of wisdom for the audience before we end this session?
Absolutely. What am I grateful for today? I'm grateful for my health. Two things I'm grateful for. I'm grateful for my health and that I get to make a choice every single day to take care of it. And I'm obviously grateful for God. Those are two things that I'm grateful for.
It's beautiful.
Yes. And then words of wisdom for the audience is you have to walk in your truth and what God's telling you. Yeah. And if you feel like every being and ounce in your body is telling you one thing, then you need to follow that because that's what God's telling you. If you feel that in your body language and in your heart, it doesn't matter what anybody else says because you know your relationship with God and you need to make a decision whether or not you're going to follow what people tell you or what God tells you.
I love that. And I'm going to add the heart ones, what the heart wants. Start living from your heart. Get out of your head. It's not going to serve you in your life. Do what Lizzie and I did. We got out of our heads. We went straight for our hearts. Look how wonderful she is doing today. She's such an inspiration. From the Meticulous Moments podcast and from me personally, Lizzie, my friend, thank you so much for joining us. It was so wonderful to spend that time with you. And we just appreciate you. We're going to cheer you on, network with you, and the audience is going to connect with you. And we know you're going to do great things in this world. So thank you so much for being so amazing.
Oh my gosh. Thank you so much for having me. This was awesome.
Thank you, Lizzie. Stay tuned, everyone, for the last few videos. I'll see you in the next session. Bye-bye.
Hi, my name is Jose Escobar, and I'm the founder and CEO of the Connected Leaders Academy. We're the #1 fastest growing community and tribe of some of the highest level entrepreneurs all around the country and around the world. We're in 36 states across the U.S., in 11 international countries, and over 240 plus members growing every single day. And I'm honored, excited, and I'm glad to say that I'm proud to be the official sponsor of the Meticulous Moments podcast with Juanita Kapp. Thank you so much for the opportunity. I'm excited for this journey.
Hey everybody, my name is Patrick Rude. I'm the owner of Rude Financial Services, a proud sponsor of the Meticulous Moments podcast, hosted and directed by the beautiful, strong, and intelligent Juanita Kapp. I cannot tell you enough about what this woman has done with this podcast and the effect that she has had on me and all of the other sponsors and people that listen. Don't miss it.